r/Askreddit by Reddit and chill. What is the most corrupt thing you've ever experienced? M's guy. In the days before the internet, I got fired by a private ambulance company for using the wrong pen to fill out Medicaid forms after a run. I used a ballpoint instead of the soft tip flare pens and was immediately sacked by the owner. A few years later, I found out he was imprisoned for Medicaid fraud. Turns out the soft tip pens he provided didn't go through all the carbon copies on the forms. And he was changing the bottom sheet to show more miles and services for each ambulance run before sending them to the state. The day I used the ballpoint was for a very long ride and cost him a lot of fraudulent money. That's why he was so infuriated. I would mail him boxes of ballpoint pens to the prison if I were you. I worked as a counselor at a youth shelter. Almost all the food clothes were donated by local churches, and they didn't buy anything for the kids. So theoretically they were just paying to keep the lights on and to keep on minimum wage staff. They had a ridiculous amount of grant money, enough to cover the food, clothes plus activities for the kids if they had to pay for those things. Yet they skimped out on essential things like training. They gave me a CP certification without ever giving me any training. The shelter had rats and roaches and at times bed bugs. The heat was out for a month. During a blizzard. On Christmas. With girls residing at the shelter. I reported them and nothing happened except them interrogating the entire staff to find out who snitched. So clearly a lot of people were getting paid the money that was supposed to be going to homeless youth. Worst place I ever worked. Edit. The kids were a blast though. Loved everyone that came through and that made it a much more bearable nightmare. That's straight out of Oliver Twist. Damn it. It's been nearly 200 years since that got published. How is it still so relevant? My university makes us buy a public speaking textbook, published by the university, and tear rubrics out of it. Your grades are penalized if you don't turn in the rubric torn out of the book for the teacher to mark your grade on. This ensures that you can't resell your book. So the next class has to buy brand new books. All the while, the university is putting up signs about why you should recycle. Not big compared to some others here, but I'm still salty about it. That's honestly ducked up. Could make for a juicy story about how universities take advantage of their young adult students though. Most countries in Africa have the most blatant public corruption out there. Here is my example. Working in the country of Chad, which I don't recommend in case anybody asks, and brought my Xbox 360 in checked baggage. Going through x-ray screening on way out of airport and almost conned out of money by the screener. But he didn't speak any English so he gave up. 1 month later. Flying out of the country you have to open all your bags before ticket counter and they inspect for random things. Of course I had my Xbox 360 and conversation went like this. Corrupt inspector. Xbox? Me. Yes. Brought it from the States for personal use and now bringing it back. Corrupt inspector. Invoice? Me. No invoice. Personal use. Bought in the States and bringing it back. Corrupt inspector. No. Invoice. This goes on for a couple more iterations until a local behind me pipes up. Local traveler. Just pay him. Me. How much? Ended up forking over 10,000 XFA to him in front of everybody, roughly $15 US. Corrupt inspector. Okay. No problem, while zipping back up my checked baggage. I was in Durban last year, Mpumalanga. Specifically, driving around with a friend who grew up there. We went past a huge mansion. 4 or 5 buildings. 3 pools, armed guards. Yada yada. Like something you'd see in the Hollywood Hills. My friend says you know who owns that? A traffic cop, a constable. SAR is so ducked. So much corruption. They have electricity load shedding, rolling blackouts, all the time because the power grid can't meet the demand. Everyone I spoke to there wants to get out. All the people that could get out, green cards, Aussie visas etc. have already left. Plus it's really murdery. I won't go into details. But I work for a municipality as a fairly low-level employee. I've been offered bribes on a number of occasions to let things slide here and there. All very tempting, but I like my job too much to risk it for $20 or so. Long story short, the biggest bribe I have been offered is $1,000. I reported it to my supervisor and his response was, "Duck dude, why didn't you take it?" I sure as hell would have. But we filed an official report. Didn't go anywhere as I didn't know the name of the people. Makes me wonder what else is going on that I don't know about. Even if I were immoral, I'd be paranoid that the person offering me a bribe is an undercover person from HQ and was testing me. An old friend of mine got a job working for a church-based charity. They would accept household donations and sell them in a thrift store they had set up to raise funds for the needy. His job was to drive around in a cube van, pick up the donated items and deliver them to the charity. He openly bragged about picking the best items for himself and would drop them off at his house before delivering the rest of the items to the charity. I called him out on it and told him it was a bad idea, seeing as his cousin and 2 aunts worked there, and put in a good word for him to get hired. That's when he told me that they've been doing the same thing for years. He told me his aunts wouldn't even keep most what they stole. Rather, they would sell the items at garage sales, and that it was okay because that's how they make their money. To make matters worse, they were paid in cash so they could keep collecting welfare. Pure trash, and needless to say, I have nothing to do with them anymore. I'm literally an illegal drug dealer and run a cleaner business than those dunts. When I was getting food at food banks, the employees and volunteers would take the best quality, tastiest food for themselves or their friends. That's one of the reasons I don't donate to food banks. One time my uncle did plumbing service to a costumer house and she asked if she could pay for it with goods. Uncle was a bit confused until she showed a garage with shelves filled with a shocking amount of cans and food packages. She worked as a volunteer for a food bank and kept the food. And I bet she wasn't the only one doing it. He refused that as a payment. In December, one of my technicians at work called me while at a high-end neighborhood we have a lot of problems with homeowners in. He told me to just listen since he had his Bluetooth headphones on. The customer is sitting there on the phone talking to someone at his company asking how many essential personnel they can cut to get the most out of their bonuses. It's the kind of thing you see in movies. But it was surreal as hell to hear someone saying that in real life while being totally serious about it. I've heard that kind of dehumanizing talk inside my workshop from a couple accountant customers. I regularly make the jokes around the idea that accountants don't believe dignity or integrity exists because they can't find the spreadsheet. Realizing that I was the only one who wasn't stealing from the company. Used to work in the IT department. And over time I noticed that things were going missing. Replace a bunch of monitors in a lab. Then a few weeks later notice all the old ones are back. What happened to the ones I just delivered? We don't have nearly as many of something in stock as it says on our shipping receipt. And why are we always out of service kits for the copy machines? Yeah. All of that was going on eBay or Craigslist or somewhere else. Didn't realize it for years. Maybe I'm just really oblivious. But the whole department was in on this. My wife's company had a sad situation recently. One of their suppliers called and notified them that some tools he had produced for my wife's company were being offered for sale on eBay. These were custom built tools. So it was obvious they were stolen. The police set up a sting operation and arrested the seller. He worked in the warehouse. At least he did before landing in jail. Once while working as a night shift cashier at a store, my supervisor randomly told me to take a break and that he'd take over the register for me. I was just happy to sit down and went to the break room while he made small talk with a customer he seemed to know. I thought nothing of it and finished my shift as usual. The next day, the store manager called me into his office and fired me. I was flabbergasted. He said that I gave a 99% discount on over $150 worth of merchandise last night. I told him that I didn't. And couldn't without supervisor approval anyway. They had to enter their unique code to give discounts. I was fired because it was my register and my supervisor kept his job. Call corporate. They'd want to know. Had a friend who taught at a ritzy private school. Parents there pretty much bought grades. Had a girl cheat off me in math class for 2 entire years. My GPA was better. But she was still ranked 4th in the class. Me. 6th. Both of her parents were teachers coaches. Know this one all too well. I work for a non-profit faith-based drug alcohol rehab. Turns out that in 2018 our founder and president CEO was skimming money from the company to, among other things, buy clothes and jewelry for his girlfriend. His wife must have been pissed when she found out. He had also ostensibly been clean for the better part of 30 years but was also getting high. And he's an ordained minister with his own church. Clothes and jewelry for his girlfriend. Me. Well, that's not cool. His wife must have been pissed when she found out. Me. Dude, duck ED up so hard. My wife and I bought a house. The landlord wanted access to the apartment we were living in the meantime so he could renovate it and sell it at an exorbitant price. We told him multiple times that we were going to keep and maintain the apartment to the end of our lease, only had 23 days left, and that we were going to clean it, etc. like normal. He didn't like that. So he performed an illegal lockout. Then charged us a $750 cleaning fee saying we left it a mess. The entire $1,900 rent for the last month and attempted to keep our $1,900 security deposit. What he didn't know is I'm not one of these uninformed foreigners he's used to threatening. I live in Nick and Bensonhurst, which has a heavy Russian, Pole, Italian and Chinese immigrant population. I know the law damn well. So I went to the apartment and recorded him in the act of locking me out. I'm big black dude, so I was showing restraint by not manhandling him since I'd immediately be found at fault. Then I gathered every ounce of proof I could. Built a case and sued his ass. We also hit him with 311 hazard reports and he got charged a shit ton for repairs. Lead, it was one spot in the closet. But he was still charged. After about 2 months of back and forth, he acquiesced and settled out of court, giving us back the full last month and full security without charging us the cleaning fee. Know the law, people. Don't let anyone try to pull one over on you. Too many landlords think deposit means gift. Serbia or Brazil? I dated a co-worker and at some point it turned out she had a boyfriend. Apparently she just had a rough time with him and I just so happened to be kind of attractive to her and gave her the attention she's been missing out. After I found out and backed off, the two suddenly got closer again and she told me she couldn't believe that she was dumb enough to almost leave that wonderful man for me. To which I replied something along the lines of, and I can't believe I was dumb enough to ignore the red flags. We never exchanged a single word after that. On my next shift I got called into my boss's office. He told me that she claimed I was stalking and threatening her, and that she was trembling in fear because we had the same shift that day. She even cried in front of him. I was completely baffled and started to tell him what happened. I even showed him the my chat and call logs. He actually believed me, but still had to fire me since she was working full time for about a year and a half, while I've only worked there for 3 months. And in part time. Economically, keeping her was the right thing to do. But morally, yuck. I considered suing her for those claims. But in the end I didn't. The whole crew ignored her best they could after that. Karma, I guess. That's when you message the boyfriend. This is more corrupted than my Paycayman red save file after catching missing though. I guess I'm lucky, because this wasn't that bad. My friend and I were traveling from one shitty former Soviet republic to another by train. We noticed that a more direct route would save us money, but involved travel through a third country for which we had no visas. It's only trouble if we get caught. We decided. We got caught checking tickets and passports. The kid in the shitty polyester uniform and crooked hat spotted the missing visas immediately. He said problem. Big problem, and took our passports away. Time passed. After a while, the kid returned with his boss, an older version of himself in the same uniform, but nearly passed out drunk and smeared with grease. He slumped against the door, his eyes alternately swiveling and closing, as Nabadajavesada kissed and rattled by the train windows. I think I tried to make my case that we had made an honest mistake. Finally, my traveling companion opened her wallet and pulled out the entire sheaf of soft currency she'd forgotten to convert, and literally slammed the wad into Lieutenant Borovica's gut. He ducked off. Junior gave us our passports back and may have given us a warning. Sad thing was, They could only spend that soft currency in the country we were just coming from, which they were not citizens of. I hope they found a way to have a good time with it. They probably converted it into whatever the local currency was before spending it. If it was a lot of money, it would have still been worth it for them. Ducking, like and subscribe.